Hello everyone, and welcome back to RM History. Before I start this video, I'd like to say that I am happy for you to correct any information that is wrong, but I would like a source to support your correction. With that said, let's get into the video. A history of Sir Joseph Williamson's mathematical school, an RM Research production. Chapter 1: The founding of the school. In his last will and testament, Sir Joseph Williamson had bequeathed £5,000, "towards the building and carrying on the perpetual maintaining of a free school at Rochester, for the instructing and educating of such youth there who were or should be the sons of freemen, these towards the mathematics and all other things which might fit and encourage them for sea service and arts and calling leaders and relating thereto." Sir Joseph's wife, Lady Catherine O'Brien, and Joseph Hornsby, who was another executor of Sir Joseph's will, attempted to obstruct the execution of the will, and thus tried to stop the founding of the school. Luckily, Catherine O'Brien did not outlive her husband by long, and so didn't do too much damage, but Joseph Hornsby obstructed the sale of the buildings on the site where the school would be built. This delayed the school's construction by quite a while, but a court soon decided that the building would have to be sold, and on November 26, 1707, a path was clear for the construction of the school. The first building, built in 1708, consisted of one room 42 feet by 25 feet, and a house adjoining it for the headmaster. It was located on the unstable Field-Up Moat. The school was soon drawn up, and the first uppermaster was appointed. His name was Stephen Thornton. His pay was £100, which was determined to be in proportion to his responsibility. No other records of him as uppermaster exist, and so it is assumed that he declined the position on hearing the pay. Because of this, on the 1st of June 1709, John Colson was appointed as uppermaster. Mr. George Russell was appointed as undermaster, and had a pay of £40. He did not think this pay was fair though, and consulted the governors and asked for a pay rise. This request was declined though. Despite his opinion of the pay, Russell would stay at the school until he died in 1722. The school was first opened in September of 1709. Chapter 2: The Early Years. During its early years, the school was a boarding school, which meant that the students lived there. One of the people who lived there was David Garrick. This was in 1737, when he was almost 20. A mutual friend recommended that Garrick attend the school. Later in his life, he became a famous actor and performed in many famous places. He is now buried at Westminster Abbey. Dr. Samuel Johnson, who was a friend of Garrick, described Colson as a scholar of remote and unnecessary subjects, who neglected his family, to count the drops of rain, note the change of wind, and calculate the eclipses of the moons of Jupiter. According to Johnson, Colson lived in the highest room of the house, aloof from all human emotion. The early school had many connections to the Royal Society. Its founder was the second president of the Royal Society, and its first headmaster was a fellow of the Royal Society. John Colson was a member of the Royal Society when Isaac Newton was president. Because of this, Colson translated many of Newton's works into English, as they were written in Latin. John Colson would remain at the school until he moved to Cambridge so he could teach at another school. As Colson left, Pierce Dixon quickly replaced him. Not much is known about Pierce Dixon, so it is guessed that he was not very significant to the school and the local area. Dixon was a Fellow of the Queen's College, Cambridge, and later became a Master of Arts. He was also the Vicar of Hartlip from 1756 to 1759,
and the Vicar of Stockbury from 1759 until his death in 1766. Reading the school rules from the period can give us a rough idea of what life inside the school would have been like. These rules ordered that both boys and masters to be at school by 7 a.m. They would be in lessons until 11 a.m., at which time they would have lunch. Lunch would last 2.5 hours. Boys would go back to lessons at 1:30. Afternoon school ended at 5 p.m. in summer and 4 p.m. in winter. All school holidays were based off what the Church of England said. The school would have Thanksgiving off, the day of choosing and swearing the mayor of the city, and several other days. There was also a month's holiday for Christmas, a fortnight for Easter, and 3 weeks for Whitsun. When students did go to school, they were required to have their quote, hands and face clean washed and their hair combed. No evidence exists of harsh punishments in the school, but we can only assume that they were harsh. Some examples of punishments during this period included flogging and caning. Chapter 3: The Dark Ages. In 1766, Joseph Hawkins replaced Pierce Dixon as upper master, and in 1781, Benjamin Hawkins replaced Francis Baker as undermaster. He would later become upper master in 1816. The period of which includes the headmasterships of both Joseph and Benjamin Hawkins is known as the Dark Ages of the school's history. By 1774, the school building was visibly neglected and had fallen into disrepair. Because of this, the school was ordered to be repaired and worthy of being a school. With this, burgesses were also admitted to the school rather than just the sons of freemen. A burgess could join the school for £4 an annum. More governors were also hired at the end of the 18th century. In 1809, the Thames and Medway Canal Company sent a letter asking the school to sell its land to the company. They also said a survey of the land would occur on the 10th of November 1809. This matter was taken to court, and after a while it was ordered that the school did not have to sell their land. 1816 saw the resignation of Joseph Hawkins and the appointment of Benjamin Hawkins as the upper master. Thomas Prow was also made the undermaster. During the early years of the 19th century, the freemen of Rochester, who sent their sons to the school, asked the governors to improve the school as it was not what Sir Joseph Williamson would have wanted. With this, a new set of rules was released. The rules would have a set time for students to be at the school and holidays that they would have. It also stated what equipment they needed. If any of these rules were broken, they would be expelled. Inspectors would examine the school and would state in their report how the education system in the school needed improvement. With this, the school was split into two divisions. The upper division learned navigation, the use and construction of the plane and Mercator's chart, mensuration, land surveying, geometry, algebra, writing, reading, and English grammar and composition. The second division learned arithmetic, writing, reading, and English grammar. The result of this reorganization was disappointing as, according to the inspector, no improvements had been made. These troubles led to the resignation of Benjamin Hawkins in 1831. Chapter 4: The Recovery. Not many pictures exist of this period in the school's history, and so there are not any shown. Rather, it will be what Rochester looked like at the time. At the governor's meeting on the 17th of August 1831, they unanimously elected the Reverend John Graham. They did this because he, quote, produced not only the requisite testimonials, but also in addition to them, the most satisfactory certificates of his moral and religious character, and his experience in tuition. On his arrival, the school closed for a while so that the building could undergo repairs. The school later reopened on January 9th, 1832, after repairs that were more costly than previously expected. A few major events happened during the time that Mr. Graham was the upper master, one of these being the admittance of the sons of non-freemen. This was a controversial matter, and the freemen that sent their sons to the school were not very happy and sent a letter. This matter was quickly dismissed by the governors, and the freemen just had to put up with it. Other events occurred, like the adoption of new subjects in the school's curriculum. This included land surveying, articles of the Church of England, and Greek and history. In 1860, property was purchased next to the school so that a new schoolroom could be built, but soon after, Mr. Graham was given 3 months' leave due to health reasons. In January 1861, he resigned after 29 years of service to his school. He would later pass away in 1874, and a plaque would be placed in St. Nicholas's Church, Rochester, to remember him. The governors unanimously elected Reverend Thomas Cobb as the next headmaster. Mr. Cobb would spend some of the school's funds on teaching resources and get the governors to increase the pay of the headmaster. Ultimately, he wouldn't last long as headmaster and would resign in 1876. The then second master, Mr. Bathurst, would then become the headmaster, and the Reverend F. Brown was appointed as the second master. Mr. Brown would resign after a short while, and Mr. Gervase Woodhouse was appointed second master. Mr. Bathurst would resign after 4 years as headmaster because of a poor report from an inspector. The inspector stated in his report that vast reorganization was necessary. Chapter 5: The Renaissance. In 1880, Mr. Charles Bird became the headmaster. The appointment of Mr. Bird as headmaster would mark the start of a period of growth in the school's history. When he arrived, the school only consisted of an A block, which was the headmaster's house, and a B block, which was for teaching. The school was not well known outside of Rochester, and only sent 2 boys to Oxford each year. Along with this, the school only had 8 pupils. Because of this, Mr. Bird took it upon himself to expand the school. A new scheme was put into operation. It allowed the admittance of boys under 13 for £4 and 10 shillings a year, and over 13 for £6 and 15 shillings a year. 4 scholarships were granted in 1880. These were granted to 2 boys already in the school, and 2 who were not. Throughout the 1880s and 90s, multiple charities would give money to the school so that scholarships could be given. By 1882, the school had 300 pupils, and in 1905 it had 278. In 1889, one of the large classrooms was partitioned into 2, so that the problem of accommodation was not as big. Later, in 1891, a new block was going to be built, but the school did not have enough funds to build it. In 1892, however, plans for a new building were sent to the charity commissioners for their approval. The school mortgaged the Waldham estates with the Kent Insurance Society for £2,450. A strike caused a 3-month delay, but in 1894 the building was finally finished. The new building was opened at a public ceremony by Sir Julian Goldsmid. 3 years later, a workshop was erected, and certain improvements had to be made after an examiner reported that the building needed better ventilation and furniture. In 1881, there were only 4 staff members, and with the rapid expansion, this number had to increase. The expansion also called for more funds. The fund came from the original will of Sir Joseph Williamson, the land at Waldham and Higham which they had rented out, and the different charitable organisations in the area. Some more subjects were also added because of the Endowed Schools Act of 1869. The school adopted the following subjects: Euclid, chemistry, physics, geography, drawing, and Latin. Another activity that Mr. Bird introduced was organised sports. This was so that the prestige of the school was heightened. By 1882, cricket and football were introduced. The school rented out different fields to play on until they finally settled on the Riverside Club at Borstal. In 1892, a cycling club was formed, and in 1900, a rifle club was formed. Many other clubs were also formed. Overall, Mr. Bird was a massive influence on the school and led it through some of its best moments. Chapter 6: The Modern Times. In 1910, Mr. Bird died, and the school's governors had to find a new headmaster. They soon decided to elect Mr. Harry James Cape, who came from King's Schools, Canterbury. Mr. Cape was only headmaster for 6 years, but still made some important decisions in that time. One of those decisions being the purchase of the cricket ground that they rented, and one of his final decisions was to establish a cadet corps at the school. While Mr. Cape may not have been at the school for very long, he did have a very large impact. When he came to the school in 1910, there were 279 pupils there, but when he left in 1916, there were 439. He would keep in touch with the school and attend events until his death in 1949. As Mr. Cape resigned in 1916, the governors were again put to the task of finding a new headmaster. They soon chose Mr. A. W. Lucy. Soon into Mr. Lucy's headmastership, in 1917, a new C block was opened. One of the major things that Mr. Lucy brought to the school was its house system. He did this because he wanted a way to group the boys into the district that they lived in, so that they could practice sports easier and get to know the other pupils. The new houses were Bridge, Castle, Gordon, Pit, and Tower. Bridge was for the boys who crossed over Rochester Bridge. Castle was for the boys who lived in Rochester. Gordon was for the boys who lived in Old Brompton and Gillingham. Pit was for the boys from Chatham and Luton, and Tower was for the boys from Gillingham High Street and Chatham Hill. With the creation of the houses came the creation of the Cockhouse Championship. This championship was for the boys to take part in throughout the year. They would have to play sports matches to get points, and would also have to have good schoolwork to get points. Whatever house had the most points at the end of the year would win. Another one of Mr. Cape's ideas was the School Operatic Society. By this time, it was very successful and had been in different theatres in the local area. The influenza pandemic and World War I both affected the school massively, but the school was quick at recovering, and a report written in 1921 stated that all areas of the school were satisfactory. A few years later, in 1924, the old Williamsonian War Memorial was given to the school at a Founders' Day ceremony. It remains at the school to this day. Mr. Lucy's health broke down, and in 1926 he decided to resign. Not long after, Mr. Edwin Dowsett Clark was chosen by the governors out of 90 applicants to be the headmaster. One of Mr. Clark's first moves as he came to office was to change the school winter sports from football to rugby. By this time, sport in the school was a big thing, and there were many different teams for different types of sports. In 1930, the old Williamsonian club decided to form a rugby section so that once pupils finished at the school, they could still play rugby with their former teammates. And in 1933, the headmaster decided to form a table tennis club. 1936 was the last year the school owned the field at Borstal, as it was acquired by the Shortsboro as a field for their sports team. Because of this, the school bought over 30 acres of land at the Great Delcay Farm. This later became Priestfield's ground. The school also played in its first hockey tournament in 1939. In 1940, many of the school's pupils were evacuated to Canterbury, and later in 1941 they were moved to Wales. This was until 1942, when the school building was reopened and pupils returned from Wales. Not long after, Mr. Clark unexpectedly passed away at the age of 56. The school quickly got a member of staff to become the acting headmaster until a new person could be found. This acting headmaster was Mr. A. C. Cheeseman. He would stay in this position until 1944. Mr. Kenneth R. Emerson was welcomed as headmaster in September 1944. He would lead the school through the rest of the 40s and part of the 50s. Throughout the 10 years that he was in office, he would help out a lot towards the recording of the history of the school. He would help get information for the writing of the book A History of the Mathematical School, Rochester, in which he would write the introduction, and he would also help with the book Math School Recollections. After World War II, the school was given an addition to the old Williamsonian War Memorial for the people who had fallen in World War II. Mr. Emerson left the school in 1953 and was replaced by Mr. Leslie Thomas Wadhams. One of the major events that took place during Wadhams's time in office was the transition to a new building. The school building on the High Street was falling into disrepair and a new building had to be found. Because of this, the school moved to a new site on Maidstone Road, which is where the school is located today. The school moved to this site in 1968. When they arrived, the site only consisted of the main block, hall, sports hall, gym, swimming pool, and science block. As time went on though, the school would expand. Wadhams would leave the school in 1971 and was replaced by A.R. Hall. With that comes the end of this documentary. This is a list of sources that I used to get the information for this documentary. I also thought it would be good to show some things that are in my collection and come from this school. First off is this book that was awarded to a student who went to the school in 1899. The book is about philanthropy and was written in 1896. I also have these two books. On the left is A History of the Mathematical School, Rochester. It is about the history of the school and was written in 1951. On the right is Math School Recollections. It has different recollections from past students throughout the 20th century. That is the end of this video. Thank you for watching.